Hi, welcome to this session on getting the skills that employers want. This is going to be delivered by Stephen Isherwood, who is the CEO of the Institute for Student Employers. My name is Sam, and I'll be chairing this session today. We're really lucky to have Stephen here today. He's exceptionally experienced in graduate recruitment, having been the CEO of the ISE for the last 7 years and the 7 years previous to that, head of graduate recruitment for Ernst & Young. The ISE offers employers support and guidance on developing their graduate and school leaver talent. And Stephen's guided the ISE through really significant change in the graduate recruitment market. And he's been instrumental in the ISE delivering comprehensive research on issues affecting graduate, intern and apprenticeship research. This presentation will be around 20 minutes and then Stephen will be available to answer your questions. Please submit your questions through the Q&A box on the right hand side of your screen. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Stephen, and he's going to give you his take on graduate recruitment at the moment and the skills that employers want. Stephen?
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for the introduction. So my name is Steve Isherwood. So I lead an organisation called the Institute of Student Employers. Just to give you a bit of background, we're a members organisation. So we've got nearly 300 employer members who are all, graduate recruiters. And we also have about 90 universities that are members, then a number of suppliers to the industry as well. So we're very much involved in that intersection between education and the world of work. Sam gave you a bit of an idea about my background. So yes, I've been in this industry for over 20 years now, and I run graduate programs before I started this job. So what I want to do is cover over some information around the market and then just give you an idea around what it is employers are looking for and how to navigate all of these unusual times, shall we say. Fiona, can you move on to the next slide, please? So this is 2020. It's been a very unusual year. So I've got a few grey hairs, as you can tell. So I've worked through 2 or 3 recessions now. And there are some characteristics that are similar to I guess, experiences in the jobs market, from the financial crash, the dot-com crash, and the early 90s recession as well. Then, of course, there's also a very different lens to this, which is around actually the lockdown, the pandemic side of it. And that's affected things like internships, placements. It's also, of course, had a significant impact on the kind of casual work that you might be able to do and how you might interact with the job market. So some similarities and then also some considerable differences, which I want to talk through over the next 20 minutes. Fiona, can you move on to the next slide, please? So what's the jobs market like at the moment? Well, there's no denying that it is a difficult jobs market. We do regular surveys of employers and ask about their vacancies. And as you will see from this slide here, actually, overall graduate vacancies are down. Overall, they're down by roughly 12%. So I think it's important to stress that while there might be difficulties in the market, there is still quite a lot of recruitment activity happening. So if you flip those numbers around, that means roughly 80% of the vacancies that we would see in a typical year are actually still out there and being recruited for. But I think one of the challenges is that we tend to talk about the graduate jobs market as kind of as a whole, as one thing, whereas actually what it is, it's a series of different sectors and different industries. And different industries have been affected differently. And then also businesses within industries have been affected differently, some doing better than others. So from the organisations that we work with, it's those in the retail sector, FMCG, that sort of fast-moving consumer goods brands. They're the industries that I guess have been hit the hardest by this pandemic in terms of their ability to recruit and hire graduates. But then you look at other sectors. So let's take the charity and public sector. Actually, we've seen vacancies increase there. So those organisations are increasing more students than they were this time last year. And then you've got a range of other industries in between. I guess the biggest recruiters of graduates tend to be sort of the finance sector, the legal sector, professional services. Actually, what our data shows is they're relatively flat this year, so recruiting roughly the same number of students as they did last year. The one thing I will stress is that we very much deal with structured graduate recruitment. So that's the kind of organisation that delivers 2 to 3 year graduate programs. I think it's really important to emphasise that actually the majority of graduate jobs aren't actually on structured programs like that. There's a whole different range of jobs and careers out there that recruit in different ways. So one of my first tips is to really do your homework, understand what it is that you want to do and what's happening in your particular industry and the kind of employers that you're interested in working in. Fiona, can you move to the next slide? So this is a picture of graduate vacancies in the sort of 20 years before this pandemic hit. And the reason I wanted to show you this was to actually give you a bit of a positive message around graduate jobs. So when you go back to 2008-9, when the financial crash happened, actually graduate vacancies fell by about 25% then. They fell more than they have fallen this year. So actually the jobs market was tougher then. And actually, and what this graph shows really is that the job market does bounce back, it does recover. So I'm not going to deny that some of you are going to have a difficult time, finding the roles you want, the jobs you want, but actually do take heart that there are jobs out there and that also the market will recover. One of my predictions, as much as you can be accurate with a crystal ball, is I think that the jobs market might recover quite quickly next year. Even if you go back to 2008, we knew of employers that were struggling to fill vacancies in certain sectors and certain locations. So it is important that as much as possible, I know it's difficult, but you keep that kind of positive outlook on the student job market. Fiona, can you move on to the next slide? So how are employers hiring at the moment? This is where the pandemic is very different to anything that we've experienced before. Those employers that are still recruiting, of course, it's highly unlikely they'll be able to call you into an office and do the kind of interviews and assessment centres they used to do. So what employers have told us is that they've moved very quickly to put more of their recruitment online. So things like web-based interviews, they've been around for quite a long time. And actually, if you've been to your career service or you've used platforms like Prospects to explore how this job market works, you'll know that they're relatively common, but they're being used even more now. What's changed is that employers are now delivering things like assessment centres via platforms such as Zoom and Teams and things like that. And that is very different. So employers have moved those processes online. So actually, if you're entering the jobs market, that's something that you're going to have to get used to, do a bit of homework, understanding how those platforms work. And there is plenty of stuff out there now to help you with that. The underpinning piece behind it in terms of what employers are looking for, I'll come on to that shortly, that really hasn't changed. So the skills, attributes that employers are looking for, that is the same, but actually how you might go through the exercises that demonstrate that have changed. The other thing I would say is the employers that I've worked with are very keen to actually help students like yourselves be able to navigate those platforms. So applying to the employers should be, actually, if you get through to that stage, be telling you actually what to expect, how it might work, and how to prepare for it, and how to get the best of yourself over on those platforms. I think sometimes people think that employers, are desperate to reject people, that they're all about saying no. Whereas actually, from my own experience as a recruiter, yes, recruitment's, it's a tough market. People get through and people don't. But actually, employers want to hire people. That's why they're in the business. And actually, making yourself more employable is actually what employers are looking for, because bottom line is employers are in this jobs market because they're looking to hire the kind of talent that yourselves have. Can we go on to the next slide, Fiona? It's worth talking a little bit around work experience and internships and placements, because of course, again, that's something that has been significantly hit because of the pandemic. Employers haven't been able to get people into their offices and buildings and do the kind of stuff that they would normally do over summers and holidays. But not all programs have been cancelled. I know lots of businesses that have been able to still do placements if that's how they're geared up. IBM was a good example. You know, they still brought all their placement students into the organisations. They made sure people had laptops, had Wi-Fi connections at home, all that kind of stuff. But what quite a lot of employers have done, they've not been able to do internships, but they've been able to do shorter programs online. They might have been virtual projects, skills-based training, or online mentoring programs. So do have a look out for that, because a lot of that stuff is out there. Employers are really keen to engage with you in the early parts of your career thinking, because actually that helps them spot talent for the future, and also it helps equip you with the kind of knowledge and skills you need to do well in that job market. So it has changed. The traditional programs aren't running in the way they used to, and it'll be a while before they bounce back. That's really determined by things like lockdown and when a vaccine comes through. But don't make the mistake of thinking that actually that means employers aren't willing to engage, because they most certainly are. It's just finding ways that they're doing that. Fiona, can you go on to the next screen? Next slide. So what is it that employers want? I want to spend a bit of time now just giving you an insight into what it is that really employers are after. That's what I find that most people really want to know. They want to know about the selection process, and also what is it that employers want. Well, this is a really important statistic. The majority of employers in the UK don't recruit by degree subject. So my own experience, I used to work in the professional services sector, recruiting accountants, consultants, tax specialists, corporate financiers. And the majority of our recruits didn't have a degree that was directly relevant to the subject. What employers are looking for is this mixture of skills, knowledge, and abilities. They're looking for potential. They're looking for people that've got, you know, the skills that they can then provide the technical training to. And actually, it's a funny thing. But when I used to look at the data in some of the previous companies I worked in, actually those with non-relevant degrees over time could do better, because they had, you know, more creative thinking skills, better problem solvers, whatever. So don't be limited by what you studied. Have a very flexible mind when it comes to approaching the jobs market. Fiona, can I have the next slide, please? So what are those skills that they are looking for? This is a relatively complicated slide, so I won't go through every single number and every piece in detail. But there's a whole load of stuff around what skills it is that employers are looking for. There's a mountain of reports, and one of the challenges is that the language can sometimes be a bit confusing from a student point of view. People use different terms to talk about different things. So we, as an organisation, have collated a lot of that information, and we've captured it in these in the language that you'll see on this slide. So if you start actually at the bottom of this chart, this tells us actually what employers think about the people they've hired and the skills they've got. So what it means is that employers actually expect the students they're hiring to have some pretty good team working skills, some good interpersonal skills, an ability to solve problems, manage their time. Actually, when it comes to more complex things around the world of, like, you know, how do you manage up? How do you deal with conflict in the workplace? How do you negotiate? How do you influence? Well, actually, employers don't really expect you to have that skill. What they want to understand is, have you got the potential to learn and develop those skills? And that's what the black line on this graph means, is actually employers expect graduates not to have those skills, and they will direct their training and development programs in that way. The pink bit on this graph is a really useful one to look at, because that piece is where employers tell us they expect the people they've hired to be a bit better in this area than they can prove to be. So things like resilience, you know, being able to deal with difficult situations when time gets tough. And employers are going to look at that a little bit more at the moment, because the world of work is a challenging place. Employers want people who can, you know, deal with difficult situations, respond, etc. Business communication is important. So actually, you're all probably very used to using social media, using technology to communicate. Actually, workplace communication is a little bit different, still very much driven by emails. The language is different. So the more you can kind of get tuned into that, the better. And I think this is a really important one that I'll come back to in a couple of slides, and that's around self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability to actually look at what you're doing, look at what you've done, and learn from it. So, and knowing also what your strengths and weaknesses are and how to manage that. Employers want people who are going to learn quickly and develop, and actually it's through that level of self-awareness that you can demonstrate that you've got that potential to very much develop. Fiona, can I have the next slide, please? So what does that mean in practice? Well, putting it more simply, let's cut through the HR speak. Teamwork is about working with people, but really importantly, getting things done with and through other people. Teamwork isn't just about being able to get along nicely with your colleagues and chat away and get on smoothly. It's about dealing with complex stuff done. In the world of work, there are conflicting priorities, conflicting personalities, but everything has to be delivered with and through people. So that's what employers are looking for. The reason employers recruit students, they recruit graduates, is because they know that students are a very good talent pool and do have the intelligence to deal with the kind of complexities that they're working with to get through the training programs. But I think it's really important that you understand that it's a practical intelligence they're looking for. It's really important for the employer that you work for to be able to problem solve, think clearly, and most importantly, deliver solutions. It's not about actually, esoteric thinking about delivering something in theory. It's about actually delivering problems. I come from very much client-facing businesses. Clients pay the organisations I work for money to deliver solutions, and that's actually what people are being trained in when they join those organisations. So practical problem-solving intelligence, really important. I'll come back to point 3 in a sec, but let me just cover off the resilience thing again. I mentioned this. All jobs can be boring and dull at times. Work can be challenging. My days are often filled with doing stuff I probably would rather not be doing, if in all honesty. I have a little pet theory. This is not based on research, but you've kind of got to really enjoy 70% of what you do to put up with the 30% that you won't enjoy, because every job has that element. Get that ratio wrong and you're probably in the wrong job. But employers want that. Employers want people who can, that cliche, roll up their sleeves and get stuck in, often when work can be, either a little bit dull or actually challenging. So that point that I skipped over about passion for your chosen career in industry, this can be a difficult one, because on a previous slide I said that most employers don't recruit by degree discipline, and employers know that yourselves as students are highly unlikely to have that much relevant work experience. So you have, in a sense, a great opportunity in terms of the flexibility of careers you can look at, but that does bring a challenge, and sometimes too much choice can leave you a bit paralysed with, oh, what do? I can almost choose anything. So this is where it's really important you do your homework. Use prospects information, talk to your career service, and think about any work you have done. If you've done part-time work in a supermarket, you're in a business, you're looking at how that business runs. You'll know which bits of the job you like. Do you like dealing with people more, or do you like maybe, cash handling, if that's what you've done? Think about those things and think about how that might apply to the job you're going to be doing. Because think about it, when you start work, the world of work, you're going to spend most of your time there in a given week. And if you want to do well in that job, you're going to put a lot of time and commitment into that, and you're going to get the reward from that time and effort put in. If you're doing something that you genuinely enjoy, you're much more likely to enjoy your job and be there for it and successful at it. So it's really important you put some time into that. Again, think of an employer's shoes. When I was a recruiter, I'm looking at 2 candidates, both got the same level of skills, the same level of attributes, both very hireable. It's the person who has a better insight into what the job is that you're going to put your time and investment in hiring, because they are more likely actually to apply themselves to the job and be successful. So it's really important you put some work into that. But do be, like I said, employers are realistic. Some of the jobs you're applying for, you would not actually been able to do in practice. So it's finding out what information you can from whatever sources you can. Cover the next slide, Fiona. I'm conscious of time, so I'll tick through these last few slides so that we can get some time for some questions, because I'm sure you've got plenty. So skills for the future. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, what are the skills for the future? And at the moment, how will the pandemic change what employers look for? Well, I think it's too early to tell is the honest answer. And I'm not sure actually in the long run it will change the direction of travel. One of the big debates is, will technology actually make some jobs redundant? Does it mean that everybody needs to be able to write code, etc.? And there's lots of different views around that. I like this quote from Nesta, because I think actually what it suggests is that employers need people who can manage projects, who can organize things, but also really important, this creativity piece. I can't remember which, whether it was Netflix or Amazon Prime or somebody, I can't remember which one it was, but one of those media players, they produced a film that was driven by data, because they've got all this data around what people watch and what engages them when they turn off. So when they applied that to producing this script, actually it didn't work very well, because actually what was lacking was that human spark, that human creativity. So I sometimes think that actually in the future, technology will take a lot of the process stuff out of work, a lot of the more technical stuff, but actually what's really needed are people who can solve problems, deal with human interfaces, etc., etc. Which I think if you think back to that skills slide I was talking before, you can see those correlations. Can I have the next slide, please, Fiona? So I talked about self-awareness. And this is a bit more about that, really. That ability to reflect. This circle here is a learning circle. You do something, you observe yourself doing something, you think about how it went, how it didn't go. You reflect on that and you think, what could I do differently? What might I need to learn? You do some planning, and then you act and you do something differently. But then you reflect again. So it's very much a learning cycle. And employers like people who are doing that all the time, because that's how we all learn and that's how we grow. For example, it's looking back on your experiences and what you're doing will help you understand your strengths and weaknesses and how you need to adapt and learn and grow. So I think it's really important that reflection piece. I work with a lot of career services, a lot of universities, and also obviously a lot of employers, and they say that's one of the things actually that a lot of students still need to learn. You may have done a great placement, but actually if you haven't thought through what the implications of that are, actually you're much less likely to apply that into your career search. So very much keep thinking in that development, that growth mindset kind of thought process. Have the next slide, Fiona. So it's okay to make mistakes and take risks. When I used to be a recruiter, and if I'm interviewing the perfect candidate, it's got great examples for everything. Everything's gone smoothly. And I'd sometimes say, well, so tell me when something went wrong. And if somebody said, well, nothing's gone wrong, that's one of two things. Either they haven't pushed themselves, and stretched themselves into an area where they might be outside their comfort zone, or they're lying. Because to be honest with you, we've all made mistakes in one shape, form or another. I do it all the time in my working life, as I'm sure my team will be happy to tell you. It's okay to push yourselves and make mistakes. But this is where it relates to the other slide. It's important you learn from those and learn from those mistakes that help you understand what it is you need to know about yourself, about how you might need to develop your skills, or even how you might, I at one point thought I was going to have a career in finance, but actually, to be honest with you, I'm not that much of a detailed person. So me being an accountant probably wouldn't have been the best use of my skills. So really, it's okay to make those mistakes. It's okay to tell employers about them, actually, but show what you've learned from them. Go to the next slide, Fiona. I think most people know this now. It's important to remember that actually your career map is not a constantly upward ladder. Quite often, you might have to change roles, so you might move sideways. You might take a more junior role because you want to go and stretch into something different and start learning again. I think what we do know about careers is that actually that pace of change and that constant evolution isn't going to go away. So the old ideas whereby you're starting one job and you'll stay doing that job for all your working life are pretty much gone. That's why actually those skills around development, learning and training are really important that I was talking about. So it's important that you think about your career in that way. Have the next slide, Fiona. So a little bit of careers advice to wrap up with. So really important that you've got to be pragmatic at the moment, but be positive. As I said, it's a difficult jobs market out there. It is going to be a challenge, but that jobs market will bounce back, and there will be people who do okay in that job market. So if you listen to some of the things I've been talking about, do your homework, you actually will do okay. Even if it may not be immediately, and it might feel a bit dark at the moment, actually do take confidence that that the job market will recover. So be really careful and guard against disengaging because you think it's all too negative and doing doom and gloom. Be flexible. As I've said, 80% of employers don't recruit by degree discipline, so the subject you study doesn't limit what you can do. That line, everybody recruits tech. You know, you might think, actually, I want to do technology, so I have to work for a technology firm. Every organisation needs people who can do tech. If you're interested in finance, accountancy, it's not only the accounting firms. You know, every organisation has finance teams, and often they recruit graduates into that program. So think very flexibly and broadly about what you might want to what you want to do. Practice for online recruitment, as I said, it has changed. Actually, how employers are recruiting. The principles may be the same, but the platforms are different. So do your homework and practice for those online tools. And the last point on here, you know, get some clear advice on postgraduate study if that is what you're thinking about. There's nothing wrong with doing postgraduate study. You may even want to do postgraduate study just for the love of the subject. There's nothing wrong with that. But do your homework if you want to do a postgraduate because it relates to a career. Not all employers place a premium on postgraduate study. They may well treat you the same as if you were a graduate. So think long and hard about that. Do your research on that if that is something that you're thinking about. I'm conscious of time, Fiona and Sam. I've gone over by a few minutes, so put the last slide up there as a quote, but I won't talk to it, and perhaps we can take some questions if there are any.
Thank you, Stephen. That was really informative, and I think it resonated a lot with the employer panel that we had previously. A lot of those points you made, were made previously. Really, really interesting. Got a couple of questions. One from Daniel. An industry which feels all but forgotten about is the music and entertainment industries. What advice would you give to young graduate creatives who may be forced to look for opportunities in other industries using their existing skills? We're feeling a little lost, anxious, and overlooked.
Yeah, and I totally understand that. And actually, it is it's quite a challenge getting really good labour market data on the creative industries, because a lot of the opportunities in recruitment happen in much smaller organisations than in bigger organisations. And the reality is actually those sectors have been hit really hard, so there aren't the number of opportunities than there may have been. I do think in the long run it will bounce back. I think we have realised through the pandemic that the value of the arts, when we think of what the high points through the pandemic or the bits that have resonated have often been through the arts. But in terms of your skills, I go back to what I was saying. Employers, they don't necessarily look at what you've actually studied. So I'll give you an example. My background, as I said, is quite a lot of it is recruiting accountants. Musicians make very good accountants. The research shows it. It's to do with the way the brain thinks. It's to do with logical thinking. So there are lots of opportunities out there. It just might take a little bit of time for you to kind of work those through, understand what they are, understand what interests you. One of my big pieces of advice to all of you listening is go to your careers service. Often they are students don't realise actually what the kind of breadth of information career services can give you. Or they make the mistake of thinking, I can only go to a career service if I know exactly what I want to do. Career services are very much geared up to helping you if you haven't got the faintest idea. So do that homework.
Thanks, Stephen. One really quick one. We've only got a few more seconds. What's the best way to show employers you have these skills when you're writing CVs and cover letters?
Don't use obvious examples, but do use examples. You don't have to be different and kind of just wacky different for the sake of it. Let me use, I guess, a bit of a negative example. When I used to talk to be recruiting and I'd ask about teamwork, and often students would say, well, here's an example from my course. I had to do this piece of group work. Actually, that wasn't a great example for two reasons. One, everybody had to do it. So people weren't showing, their own drive, motivation. They're doing something that maybe other students didn't necessarily do. They're doing something that everybody did. And actually the group work was often not the best example, because often lecturers force these groups together. And in my experience, from being a student, actually group work was divvying up the work and just trying to bash it all together at the last minute. So you don't have to have, amazing examples working in the biggest blue chip organization in a town in Canary Wharf. There can be very practical examples from, working in a restaurant or working in a supermarket, but have those examples that show that actually you've used your own initiative. You're doing actually something that shows that you put yourself out there to get these experiences. And don't be afraid of the mundane.
Thanks, Stephen. We really enjoyed that today. Really appreciate you coming and speaking to us. Thank you very much for all your time.
Thank you. Good to talk to you all.